What would you do if the person who made your teenage years a living nightmare became your child's favorite teacher? In this deeply personal story, I take you inside the week my past returned, unexpected, uninvited, and wearing a warm smile my daughter adored. My name is Jessica, and as a single mom, I had to decide whether to protect my child at all costs or confront a decade-old wound I thought I had buried. This is a story about memory and forgiveness, the quiet bravery of moving forward, and the moment you realize healing isn't a straight line. It's a choice we make again and again. If you've ever held your breath to keep old pain from surfacing, or you've ever been a parent trying to do the right thing when everything feels wrong, this is for you. Stay with me until the end. I promise there's something here for your heart. The first time I saw his name again, it was written in cheerful dry erase marker on a whiteboard, framed with construction paper leaves. Mr. Adams, the ELA teacher everyone loved. There were cutouts of book covers taped to the door, a tiny poster that said, "Your story matters." I laughed under my breath in a way I hoped sounded like excitement, not panic. My daughter, Lily, squeezed my hand. "That's him! That's him! Mom, you're going to love him. He does voices when he reads, and today he said, the hardest part about writing is believing you're allowed to tell the truth." Her eyes were galaxies. I swallowed a memory so hard it scratched my throat on the way down. The hallway buzzed with parent night, coffee breath, perfume, and the rubber soles of hopeful parents trying not to look anxious. My heart pressed a rhythm against my ribs that didn't match the noise around us. Just a name, I told myself, just a name. But names are time machines if you've lived long enough. Then the door opened, and Mr. Adams walked out with that eternal teacher smile. He had new gray at his temples, a softness to his jawline, and laugh lines deep as ditches. He looked right at me. My blood did something that felt like falling, like running. He did not blink with recognition. He smiled the same way he smiled at the dad in the baseball cap, the mom in the scrubs, and the couple with matching tote bags. He said, "Welcome." I felt my face arrange itself into something easy. "Hi," I said, "we're here for Lily." "Lily," he said, like the name itself had sunshine in it. "You're the writer with the very dramatic mermaid saga." He glanced at me, warm and open. "Your daughter is a joy." I nodded. I made whatever sound polite people make when the past is a closed door at their back and the present is a room full of fluorescent light. "That's nice to hear," I said. It came out thin. He gestured us in. "Come see the projects." A wind moved through my bones. I went in. My daughter tugged me from poster to poster, her sentences a steady stream. "We're doing character maps. Look, this is mine." And he said, "My first paragraph was like a movie. And Mom, you won't believe this? He keeps snacks in his drawer for kids who forget lunch." And I kept nodding. I kept breathing shallowly. On the far wall, there was a photograph of a beach at dusk. A kid must have taken it. The quote underneath read, "We write to taste life twice." I took a step back and bumped the corner of a desk. Mr. Adams's voice flowed around the room. He said things like curiosity, safe space, and growth. I could taste my heartbeat in my mouth. When he finally leaned in to shake my hand, his smile went soft, like he meant it. "I'm so glad you're here," he said. "Lily told me you work nights sometimes, so I really appreciate you making the time." I made a small, neat smile. I said the sort of thing mothers say. I wouldn't miss it. I held his gaze for an extra breath, not to test him, but to make sure I was awake. The man who made me dread walking into 10th grade English was standing there looking proud of my daughter, and he didn't know me. Or maybe he did and chose the script. Either way, I could feel the old years lining up behind me like a line of ghosts, just slightly out of frame. "See you Monday," he said to Lily. "Bring me chapter 2. "We're doing chapters," she whispered to me on the way out, as if we were sharing the best secret ever. I smiled and squeezed her hand. My voice worked again, barely. I heard. Memory always brings its own weather. Walking back to the car, the air around me cooled, as if the last decade had been a window left open by mistake and the wind had come in to play with the curtains. I held on to Lily's small backpack because it was something of now, something bright and plastic and filled with crayons that still had their wrappers. At 17, I learned to fold myself smaller than a desk. I learned where his humor ended and his dislike began. Back then, Mr. Adams was new to the school, proud of his syllabi and proud of his strictness dressed up as excellence. Precision, he used to say. We will be precise in our words. What I remember most vividly is not the day the class laughed at my essay, though I do remember his frown and how he said cliché like it had a bad smell. It's not the diagramming of sentences or the abrupt, dismissive red pen. It's a day in early fall when I raised my hand and my sleeve inched down because my shirt was a little too short, my life a little too hungry, and the look he gave me wasn't about my question. It was about me being out of place. It said, "We can smell desperation." He was not cruel by sport. He was cruel by worship of rules that other people had written for him. He thought fairness meant never seeing who was in front of him. He told me once, when I missed a deadline because my mother was working nights and I'd been at the laundromat after school, that we all have obstacles, and if I want it to be taken seriously, I'd have to be stronger than excuses. I went to the bathroom and washed my face until my skin burned. I stared at the tile and promised myself I was done asking for mercy. When you are a certain kind of girl, the lesson is always be smaller, speak less, and become unremarkable. My friends loved him, the way he made them feel like their sentences could be steel bridges. He made me feel like I was missing a key that everyone else got in the mail. By the end of the year, I'd learned to write like him, clean, lean, bloodless. I got A's. He wrote, "finally," at the top of one of my essays, as if he'd been waiting for me to become someone worth grading. I went home, lay on my bed, and stared at the ceiling until the popcorn texture blurred. When he handed me a certificate at the end of the year, excellence in composition, I smiled in the photograph, the way people smile when their mouth writes checks their heart doesn't cash. There were bigger hurts in that era, a boyfriend who used silence like a weapon, a friend who broke a secret like a dish and blamed me for the pieces, and a father who waved from a distance, always too busy to walk closer. But the voice in my head that said, "Don't take up space," had his tone, clipped, professional, disappointed at the idea of me. I grew out of it in the way you grow out of shoes you once thought were your whole foot. Life will make you choose between your breath and your reputation. And after Lily was born, I started choosing my breath. Still, memory likes to set the table and ask if you're hungry for old meals. In the car, Lily talked about the student of the week board, the jar of pens you can keep if you remember to write a thank you note, and the way Mr. Adams can make even commas feel like magic. She had a light in her that night that made me want to wrap the whole city in bubble wrap. "Mom," she said, gazing out the window, "he said I have an ear. Isn't that weird? An ear? For rhythm? He said I hear the music in sentences." "That's not weird," I said. "He's right." She shifted in her seat to face me. "Did you have a teacher like that?" The streetlight painted her face gold for a moment, then let it go. I gripped the steering wheel the way people grip the edge of a boat. The truth is, I had a teacher like that, and he made me feel like the music in my head was a radio that shouldn't be played too loud. "I had an English teacher," I said. He wasn't my favorite." "Oh." Her eyebrows lifted, unsure. "But he's great, Mom. You'll see." "I see," I said. And I did. That was the trouble. I saw a man who had grown into kindness. I saw my daughter feeling seen. I saw my own girlhood watching through the window, waiting to be invited in. I turned up the radio and let a pop song fill the silence. I don't know why the tears came then, quietly, the kind that don't even make your breath hitch. Maybe because some days the past touches the present with a finger so light you barely feel it, and some days it puts its whole hand on your chest. We made mac and cheese when we got home and sat on the floor with the bowl between us. Lily told me more. He asked her what she read for fun. He told her the trick for writing good dialogue is to listen on the bus. He said every story is about a choice. That night, after she fell asleep on the couch with a book on her chest, I stood in the hallway and thought about choice like it was a door you touch with your forehead. If I told the school what he'd done to me, no, not done to me, that's not how it was. He hadn't touched me. He had just believed I was less. If I told them that, what was I asking for? Justice? For what exactly? A memory of me at 17 flinched under a comment he might not even remember? And how would I explain to Lily why her favorite teacher was suddenly someone to be wary of? How would I take from her the beautiful thing she held, permission? I went to bed with my hair still damp and dreamed of chalk dust. The next morning, I was packing lunches when Lily came in wearing a hoodie 2 sizes too big for her and that look she gets when a thought is too big for her face. "He told a story," she said, climbing onto the counter like we don't have chairs, "about when he messed up." "Mr. Adams?" She nodded, stealing a slice of apple. "He said when he was a new teacher, he thought he was helping people by being hard. That was the word, hard. And he said he thought, she squinted up at the ceiling. He said he thought fairness meant sameness. But then he learned that that's not fair because everyone starts from different places." I put the knife down. The kitchen went quiet in that way houses go quiet when remembering something they don't have words for. She swung her legs, sneakers bumping the cabinet doors in a steady rhythm. "He told you that?" I asked. "Mm-hmm. He said he wishes he could go back and tell some of his old students he's sorry. He said sometimes he dreams about a girl who kept shrinking. Isn't that weird? He said he wishes he could tell her he sees her now." I couldn't breathe for a second. The past had been a shadow on the wall. Suddenly, it was speaking back. I pressed my hands flat on the counter and waited for the floor to steady. I wanted to ask what the girl's name was in his dreams. I wanted to ask if she had curly hair and a father who forgot birthdays and a laugh that sounded braver than it felt. I wanted to ask if she worked after school and wrote essays in the break room between refilling the ketchup bottles. I looked at my daughter, who looked back at me like someone holding a lantern in a cave. That's a good story," I said finally. She grinned. "He tells good stories." When she left for school, I sat at the table with the lunch boxes and an orange that refused to peel without a fight. I thought of him standing in front of a room of 12-year-olds making a confession in the safest way. Abstract, a lesson, a parable. Maybe fewer people change than we hope. Maybe more do than we allow. I took a bite of the orange, bitter pith clinging to it. I ate it anyway. There are objects you keep because letting them go would feel like lying. My yearbook was on the top shelf of the hall closet, under a stack of board games with half the pieces missing. The cover's corners had been softened by time, by moves, and by the weight of other things put on top of it. I pulled it down and carried it to the coffee table like an animal I didn't want to startle. The photographs were a collage of kids trying on faces, a boy in a football jersey feigning seriousness, and girls in floral dresses posing like magazine ads in a hallway that always smelled like disinfectant. I found him quickly, staff page, English. He looked almost exactly as he does now, just less tired around the eyes. I traced the square of his face with my thumb and felt ridiculous. There were notes from people who don't know me anymore. "Never change. You're so funny and chem. KFC forever, baby." Someone had written "good luck" in a scrawl that could have been a prayer or a shrug. I turned to the page with the award ceremony. There I was, accepting my piece of paper. You can tell in the picture that I'm holding my breath. You can tell I don't entirely believe it. You can tell that the boy in the next row was already bored. Beneath the photograph is a caption that mentions excellence like it's a cure. I closed the book and pressed my palm to the cover. The thing about old hurt is that it shows up with receipts, like it's trying to be reasonable. I could hear his voice in my head saying things like craft, lazy writing, and this reads like a diary. He wasn't wrong about everything. He wasn't right about me. I thought about Lily's teacher telling stories about mistakes. I thought about the girl in his dreams shrinking until she disappeared. I thought about how many people we take with us into the future just by speaking their names with a certain tone. A text buzzed my phone. It was my supervisor asking if I could pick up an extra shift. I stared at the word please and thought about how the world always says please when it wants more of you than you can give. I put the yearbook back on the shelf, but lower, as if I might need it again. 3 days later, I stood on a sidewalk outside a cafe with my thumb hovering over send. The message read, "Mr. Adams, this is Jessica, Lily's mom. Would you have time for a quick coffee? I have a couple questions about the class." It was the most neutral way to invite your past to sit across from you. I could just as easily have made it worse. "This is Jessica from your 10th grade class who hid in the library to cry after school. This is the girl you called capable of better in a voice that made better sound like locked gates. This is the person you gave an award to and made her feel like an impostor in her own skin." I pressed send. My thumb tingled, my stomach rolled. He responded within 5 minutes with 2 thumbs up and a time. The swiftness made it less scary, or more. I couldn't decide. I arrived early because old habits dress like punctuality. He came in on time, like always. He looked the same as he had in the classroom, the open face and the little enthusiasm he carried, like a fire that wouldn't stay lit without work. He didn't remember me. If he did, it didn't show on his face. I waited for the flicker, "Wait, were you?" Nothing. Just, "Jessica, hi, coffee?" We ordered. He paid without asking, the sort of standard gentlemanliness that now felt like a joke the universe was telling. We sat by the window. Outside, a man in a neon vest was sweeping leaves into a neat pile, and the wind kept blowing them out again. "How's Lily doing?" he asked with genuine curiosity. The thing about time is that it can make your enemies into someone else's champion. She's thriving," I said. "Thank you for that." He smiled. "She's doing the thriving. I'm just holding space." I looked at the sugar packets. I had a whole speech in my head, polished like a stone. The first sentence was gone already. "Do you ever think about your old students?" I asked instead. Something flickered in his eyes then. Not recognition of me, but recognition of the question. He leaned back and made a face like he might laugh and didn't. "Too much," he said. "Probably too much." I nodded, moved a sugar packet, and lined it with the others as if order could be imposed on this conversation. "I was one of them," I said finally. "Old students, at Westbridge, 10th grade." He blinked, tilted his head. "Really?" He squinted like he was trying to superimpose the face of a teenager over mine. The urge to help him, to say my maiden name, to remind him of the shape of me sitting in the second row, to point to the scar on my left wrist where I burned myself making fries after school, was so strong it startled me. He started, then looked at me directly. He rubbed his jaw, thumb against the edge of his beard. "I was not great then," he said, carefully. The breath I'd been holding for a decade left me before I could stop it. I felt oddly cheated of the spectacle. No fireworks, no courtroom, just 2 people at a table with coffee cooling. "No," I said, "you weren't." He stared at his cup. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I don't know the details. I just know there are faces. I don't remember names. That part of my brain is terrible." He looked up. "But I remember a feeling of being right. I thought I was making people strong. I wasn't. I was making them small." We sat with that a long time. Outside, the man sweeping had given up on the leaves and was just watching the wind do what it does. "You gave me an award," I said, hating how petty it sounded and knowing it wasn't petty. "At the end of the year, I have a picture." He winced. "We used to do those awards like they were absolution. If we crowned a few, it was like we'd redeemed our roughness. You wrote 'finally' on an essay of mine." My voice was steady. The hand gripping the paper cup was not. When I got that paper, I felt like you'd been holding me underwater and had finally let my head up just enough to breathe. He shut his eyes, like my sentence was a blinding light. "I'm sorry," he said again. The word was not enough. The word was not nothing. He opened his eyes. "I can't fix it. I can only... I don't know. I try not to be that now." "My daughter loves you," I said, because if he was going to carry the weight of me, he had to carry the light too. "She said you told her she has an ear." He smiled then, the kind of smile you only see when someone hears themselves saying something good about someone else. "She does." I stared at the man in front of me and at the girl I carried around with me, who still flinched when she thought she heard his voice. Both were true. Both were mine. "I didn't invite you here to ruin your morning," I said. "I invited you because I needed to see you see me." He nodded, the motion slow. "I see you." The words blank-paged the space between us. Not magic, not a cure, but something that would let me write a new paragraph. That night, I wrote him a letter. I wrote it by hand on lined paper the way I used to write extra credit assignments. I told him the things I couldn't quite let fall out onto a cafe table. I wrote about the way his sarcasm had made my skin shrink. I wrote about the night I almost didn't apply to the community college because I couldn't stand the idea of sending my words to people who might laugh. I wrote about the job I took at the diner and how language lived in the hum over the grill, how the regulars told stories like they were keeping themselves warm. I wrote about Lily, how I had grown into a mother, like a person who finally found a house with windows that opened. I wrote about how, when I read to her at night, I made a point to use too many voices and too much drama, because it made her giggle and my throat didn't crack. I wrote, "The world will be hard enough. We don't need to practice." I didn't send it. I folded it into thirds and tucked it into the yearbook. I don't know why. Maybe because letters are a bridge, and sometimes bridges are just for us to look at and know they could get us across if we needed. I thought my confession to him, no, not confession, let's call it telling, would settle something in me. It did, for a few days. Then life reminded me that healing does not care about your calendars. A week later, Lily had a day. I could tell from the way she came down the stairs. Footsteps heavier than her body, face pretending she wasn't shivering. She tugged her hoodie sleeves over her hands and kept tugging, like she could disappear into them. "What happened?" I asked, only half watching the eggs in the pan. She began, then swallowed. "There's a group project," she said, the way people say there's a storm. "He put me with Tyler and Mia, and they said my idea was dumb." She tried to make it sound funny. Her eyes were shiny. I turned the stove off. The kitchen hissed like something had just been put out. "What did Mr. Adams say?" I asked. "He said to try to hear each other." She made a little gesture with her hand. "He does that thing where he's like, 'There's a story in your clash too.'" "Is there?" I asked, gently. "Maybe." She chewed the inside of her cheek like it owed her rent. "Tyler said my idea was like a Disney movie. He said real books don't, she waved, frustrated, don't have hearts." I took a breath and then another. The 17-year-old in me had opinions about Mr. Adams's pedagogy. The mother in me wanted to scoop my kid up and write an email with bullet points. I said neither of those things. "Do you want me to talk to him?" I asked. Her eyes snapped to mine. Terror, love. No, Mom, please don't make it a thing." "Okay," I said, and meant it. "Okay." I went to work that afternoon and tried not to check my phone every 10 minutes. When school let out, Lily texted me a period. Just a dot. That is the text of a 12-year-old trying not to say, "I'm drowning." I left early and told my supervisor I had a family thing. He looked at me with the mix of annoyance and sympathy reserved for single moms in movies and in real life. When I got to the school, the final bell had rung. The sky had the stretched out look it gets when the day wants to keep you. I hurried to the classroom and found Mr. Adams erasing the board while kids gathered bags and arguments. Lily was at her desk, staring at a poster on synonyms like she was trying to translate it. "Hi," I said, too bright. "Everything okay?" She didn't look at me. "Fine." Before I could do anything reckless, I heard a voice I recognized from across decades. "We'll talk more tomorrow," Mr. Adams said to a group of kids, then turned and saw me. "Jessica, hi." I said, "Can we speak for a moment?" We stepped into the hallway. A girl with a high ponytail brushed past us, laughing into her phone. He folded his arms, then unfolded them, like he knew that posture read like defense. "Is Lily all right?" he asked. "She's not," I said, and felt the parent shame wash over me that I hadn't trusted my kid to handle it. But I'm still a person. She's in a group where she's being dismissed. My tone came out sharper than I intended. 17 was speaking. "I know you like to let kids work it out, but she's 12. Sometimes the teacher sees what the kids can't." He nodded, the nod of a man who knows he's being told the truth, even if he's about to be told he could have done better. "I did step in," he said. "Maybe not hard enough." "Maybe," I said. And then, because the door between me and my old self was thin today, I added, "Sometimes fairness isn't, you know this, you said you know this." He held my gaze. I could see the tension in his jaw. "I do know it," he said quietly, "and I also know that I don't always hit it in the moment." We stood there like statues of humility and frustration. Then he said, "Do you want me to change her group?" The relief was immediate and also a little embarrassing. "Yes," I said, "please." "I will," he said. He looked toward the classroom where my daughter was folding a piece of paper into something smaller. "She's good," he said. "Not just because she can write, because she cares. Sometimes that gets mistaken for soft. It isn't." I surprised myself by tearing up. "Thank you," I said, and hated how needy it sounded and didn't. She reminds me of someone." He knew. He nodded. "I'll take care of it." We went back into the room. He called Lily to his desk and told her there had been a change. She didn't smile, but her shoulders dropped back down from where fear had been holding them. On the way out, I put my hand on her back. She looked up at me like her whole face was an apology for being human. "You're okay," I said. "Okay," she echoed. The word tentative but intact. 2 days later, Lily came home glowing. Not the old glow, a new one. Like she'd built something with her hands and it had stood up on its own. "He switched the groups," she said, breathless, "and he told us about a kid who quit writing for a whole year because someone made fun of their story. And he said he thinks about that all the time, and that in this class, we don't make fun of anyone's heart." I put the kettle on. My skills in life could be reduced to this: I put the kettle on when there's too much. She pulled a paper out of her backpack and laid it on the table like it was a new kind of proof. At the top, in neat blue ink, was a note: "Your sentences hum. Don't turn down the volume to make someone else comfortable." The pen had drawn a tiny treble clef next to it. "You see," she said, pointing, "he gets it." I stared at the treble clef until it blurred. In the tea kettle's reflection, the kitchen looked like a room from a different life, and maybe it was. I thought about a day in my own 10th grade year when he'd handed me a test. I had gotten a B+. He'd written "careless mistakes" next to 2 commas. That afternoon, on the bus, I traced those words with my finger and thought maybe there was a place where I wasn't a collection of small errors. I reached down to scratch my wrist, and my finger found the scar from the fry basket. The skin has a long memory. So do we. When the water boiled, the kettle sang. I poured. I handed Lily a mug she was too young for and watched her blow across the surface like a pro. I pulled my chair closer to hers than was necessary. "I'm proud of you," I said. She shrugged, embarrassed and pleased. "I didn't really do anything." "You did," I said. "You asked for help without saying it. That's a complicated choreography. You did it." She looked up at me then, eyes wide with something like reverence, but more like relief. "Thanks," she whispered. I wanted to tell her that she was fracturing a generational pattern, that she had walked into the room where my 17-year-old self was still practicing being small and opened the blinds. I wanted to tell her that kids are often better than the adults assigned to guide them, and that she could trust that in herself. Instead, I said, "Want to watch something silly?" We watched a baking show where people tried to make cakes that looked like guitars and failed in ways that made everyone kind. At the end, Lily fell asleep with her head on my shoulder. I pressed my lips to her hair, and it tasted like shampoo and popcorn salt and my whole life. Here is a secret of motherhood. You are always carrying more than is visible. There is the diaper bag, the lunchbox, and the backpack with the missing zipper. There are also the stories, your mother's, your own. The ones you hope your kids never have to read, the ones you pray they will. I thought about calling the district. I even copied the number into my phone. I wanted to report something, but I couldn't write the incident in the blank. Was it ethical to bring a man's 20-something mistakes to a desk 20 years later and say, "See"? Was it dangerous not to? People don't change because you tell on them. People change because something inside them either breaks or finally heals. And I had seen him trying to choose the latter. I decided to make this a daily choice instead of a verdict. Every morning I would check in with Lily about class. Every week I would read her writing and praise the parts of it that sound like her. When she struggled, I would be the person who sees. And I would forgive the past in installments, not because he deserved it on any given Tuesday, but because I was tired of carrying the personnel file of his mistakes in my body. Some days I forgave him easily. Some days the forgiveness cost me an hour of good breath. On those days, I would lodge the letter I wrote back in the yearbook and remind myself that I don't have to mail it for it to matter. On a Thursday that smelled like wet wool, rainy, gray, the city shivering, I got a call from a number labeled school. My stomach dropped the way it did when I was a teenager called to the office. Old habits really are ghosts. "Hello?" I said, like I might be in trouble. "Jessica?" It was Mr. Adams. His voice was different on the phone, quieter, less performative. "I wanted to let you know something before you heard it from Lily. We had a moment today." The hallway was full of raincoat squeaks and dripping umbrellas. I pressed the phone to my ear and stepped into the supply closet at work because, in my life, the supply closet is the confessional. "What happened?" He took a breath that I could hear. A boy in class made a joke. It wasn't about Lily, but it was about a girl in a book, and he said something about her being dramatic when she cried. And He paused. I could hear kids in the background. It was the end of day swirl. "I shut it down," he said, "but I told them about a time I watched a girl stop believing her feelings were allowed, and I told them that I think about it every time we read. I didn't use names. I tried to do it right, but I realized afterward that I might have been talking to you." I leaned against a shelf of paper towels. They pressed into my shoulder. I closed my eyes and saw the day in 10th grade when he'd asked our class to debate whether a character's tears were manipulative. I had kept my face still until the bell rang, then cried in the empty stairwell because I didn't know if my own tears counted. "Thank you for calling," I said, and meant it down to the floor. I'm okay." "I imagine you aren't always," he said softly, "and I'm sorry for my role in that. I'm trying to be the kind of teacher she, your daughter, needs, and the kind of teacher you deserved." I didn't know what to do with the specificity of that, so I held it like an egg I didn't want to drop. "She told me you're good at this," I said, "at seeing." He laughed a small, broken laugh. "I'm getting better." "Keep going," I said. "I will." We hung up. I stayed in the supply closet for a minute, and then another. At some point in my life, I started giving myself permission to pause in the middle of a day that wanted me fast. It has saved me more times than my paycheck. On Saturday, Lily and I took a bus to the old neighborhood because nostalgia, like all addictions, likes to be fed sometimes in safe amounts. The school had built a new addition where the field used to be. The parking lot looked smaller. The sky looked as big as ever. We walked to the bridge that went over the creek that kids used to dare each other to jump. I had once stood there and thought about all the ways a person could get across. "It's weird coming back," I told her. She sat on the railing, not afraid the way I was, hands gripping the metal. "It's like seeing your elementary art in a museum," she said. "Smaller, but also important." I laughed. This is the thing I never imagined, that my child would give me better metaphors than any adult in my past ever did. "I used to cry here," I said, "when I was your age." She hopped down and stood next to me. "Why?" "Because I didn't know where to put my feelings," I said, "and because I thought that if I put them in the water, maybe they'd float away." "Did they?" "Some of them," I said honestly. "Some of them learned to swim." She nodded, like that made perfect sense. "Can I tell you a secret?" she asked. "Always." "I used to think crying in front of people made me weak," she said, very quietly. "But then Mr. Adams cried once, just a little, when he read a poem about a dad and a daughter in a car, and he didn't say sorry." I watched a leaf let go of its branch and take its time falling. "That's a good teacher," I said. "Yeah," she said. Then, "Mom?" "Did you have to forgive someone to become you?" I looked at the water, at the reflections wobbling into new shapes with every ripple. "I had to forgive myself for believing people who were wrong about me," I said. "And I had to forgive some people for not knowing any better. I'm still working on it." She put her head on my arm, a weight I'd keep forever if I could. "Me too," she said. Here is what forgiveness isn't. It isn't forgetting. It isn't a soft focus filter. It isn't a cape you put on that makes you fly. It isn't a math problem. It doesn't absolve anyone. It doesn't unsay anything. It doesn't make your hands stop shaking on the days the past snarls. Here is what forgiveness is, for me. It's deciding, sometimes daily, to stop rehearsing the worst version of someone else in my head. It's choosing not to use my pain as a tool to hammer someone into a shape that makes me feel safe. It's trusting that my daughter's eyes are good and that mine can learn to be too. It's letting the hardest part about writing be believing you're allowed to tell the truth, like my daughter's teacher said, and then telling it without making it the only sentence in my story. When I see him now, in the hallway at drop-off, he nods at me in a way that says both of us know where the bodies are buried and both of us have decided not to dig. Sometimes I still hear the old voice. It says, "Careful, careful, don't like him too much, don't let him be human." That voice sounds like me, and like him, and like everyone who ever told me survival means building a museum for your pain and charging admission. On those days, I take Lily for ice cream after school and listen to her talk about the metaphor she used that made the whole class make that "ooh" noise. And I think, this is the point. This is the whole point. At the end of the semester, there was a reading night. The classroom was softer than usual. The overheads were off, lamps were lit, and there were strings of fairy lights that someone had dug out of a closet. Kids read pieces they'd written about dogs and grief and baseball and sisters and how confusing it is to love a house you also want to leave. Parents cried the way we do in public, trying to move our faces as little as possible. Lily read last. Her piece was about a mermaid who had learned to walk, and it was also about me. She didn't say it was about me. She didn't have to. There were sentences that were the sound of my life, rearranged into something her own. When she finished, the room was quiet for a breath that felt like the sea pulling back before a wave, and then everyone clapped like they were proud of their hands. Mr. Adams stood off to the side, eyes shiny. When the applause died, he said, "That's the thing about making something. You don't know who you're saving. Sometimes it's you." After, while kids ate cookies and buzzed, he came over. "You must be very proud," he said. "I am," I said. We looked at each other for a moment. There was a person behind him asking for a recommendation letter. There was my daughter talking to a boy with elbows too big for his body. There was the past, tired of standing, wanting to sit down. "Thank you for being better," I said, quietly enough that only the two of us could hear it. He didn't say, "You're welcome." He said, "I'm trying." And then he went to tell a kid that their description of rain was perfect. I went to hug my daughter like she was both still 5 and already 25. "You were wonderful," I said into her hair. She pulled back, eyes bright. "Did I sound like me?" she asked. "You sounded like the best version," I said, "the one that doesn't ask permission." Later that night, after Lily fell asleep with her hair still smelling like other people's living rooms, I took the yearbook out one more time. I put the letter I'd written on top of it. Then I took the letter and I burned it in the kitchen sink. The flames curled the edges. The paper blackened and then went soft, like it was sighing. I watched until there was nothing but thin ash, then turned on the faucet and washed it away. I didn't burn it because I was over it. I burned it because I am not a museum. I am a woman who gets up every day and chooses not to let old sentences decide how loud my daughter gets to be. I am a mother who will walk into a school and say, "This isn't working, please fix it." I am a person who can drink coffee with a man who once made her walk smaller and decide not to set the room on fire because the better fire is the one in my chest that keeps me warm. The promise I make to my daughter is simple. I will not make you carry the things I was too young to put down. I will tell you when I'm scared so you know it's okay to be. I will stand up for you when your voice shakes. And when the past shows up in a clean shirt and a smile, I will look it in the eye and say, "We can do this differently now." If you're still here with me, maybe you know what it is to have your history introduced to your child with a handshake. Maybe you're a parent wondering if speaking up will break something you can't fix. Maybe you're someone who made mistakes and is trying every day not to become the worst version of yourself again. Maybe you're all of those people at once. Here's what I know. You can change your mind and the way you show up without rewriting the whole book. You can be the person you needed when you were younger and still hold the hands of the people who weren't. You can let your child love someone who hurt you once, if that person is doing the work to be safe. You can leave if they're not. The night after the reading, Lily woke up from a dream where she said she was running in a hallway toward a door. "Did you get there?" I asked, smoothing her hair back, a habit as old as her head. She smiled in the dark. "Yeah," she said. "It was open." If this story stayed with you, if you felt a twinge in your chest, or saw your own past standing in a fluorescent hallway, stay with me a little longer. What would you have done in my place? Would you have told the school right away, or sat across from him like I did? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read them all, and your stories help someone else feel less alone. If you found this meaningful, please hit like. It helps more people find this. Subscribe and turn on notifications for more stories about the messy, beautiful ways we grow. And if you know a parent, a teacher, or anyone who's trying to forgive themselves for who they used to be, share this with them. Your share could be the light they needed today. Thank you for being here. Your story matters. Keep going.